So as I'm working on my SC300 brake master cylinder swap, I figured I may as well take advantage and change out my clutch master and slave cylinder. These haven't been working too badly, but I have noticed some odd behaviors from my clutch pedal periodically, so I'm going to change them predominantly as preventative maintenance. Now, in order to do this, all you really have to do is drain this out, which I already did using a fluid transfer pump. Undo the line coming into it, right? That line goes from here down over to where the slave cylinder is by the transmission. Then you undo 2 bolts that are holding it to the firewall. Then you have to undo a pin that goes through the shaft on the opposite side and into the clutch pedal. And I'll show you what that looks like. So it's extremely difficult to get you a good shot of what this looks like up under the footwell, but this right here that you're seeing is the clutch pedal lever, and that silver shaft coming out onto that end is actually the shaft from the clutch master cylinder. So there's a pin that goes through it and into this shaft, and it holds the two together. You just have to undo that in order to be able to pull that out. Let's see if I can... You see that pin right there going into this bar? That's the pin that you gotta undo. You're basically gonna grab like some needle nose pliers, pull out the retaining clip, slide that pin out, and then this entire thing can just go out toward the engine bay. Alright, so at this point I'm going to take my brand new clutch master cylinder and go ahead and install it. It goes in the same exact way that it came out. It's a very simple process. I purchased an Eisen one off Rock Auto. Eisen makes the OEM Toyota cylinders for both brakes and clutch, so I'm pretty much guaranteed that this is going to be OEM quality. Buying straight from Toyota might have granted you more peace of mind, but I don't know that it would necessarily grant you more quality, because it should be the same. This is manufactured by Eisen for Toyota, but your beliefs and mileage may vary. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop this in. I mean, I've before used things like this from AutoZone, and you get life out of them. It's a rubber plunger and an aluminum cylinder. As long as the surface finish is acceptable, I don't suppose it's gonna be a major issue. Here's the new guy. Go ahead and pop that guy in. One thing to note, before you do pop this thing in, this actually has an adjustment on it, right? You can adjust this. You want to take your old one and adjust it to match your old one. So an easy way to make sure that you get this right is, instead of just trying to count turns, you can go ahead and take a caliper, and you can use the caliper to measure the gap in one and make sure that the gap in the other one matches. And that's exactly what I'm going to go ahead and do right now. You don't even actually need a real measurement, so your caliper doesn't even have to be on if it's digital. You really just can place it in the gap right? And once I have the setting, I'm gonna lock the caliper. Then I'll come over here and literally I'll just rotate this until it matches. So that's about the 4.9 that I want. Once you've set the gap to where you want it, you can use the lock nut to hold it in place. So the vacuum line of the booster was in the way of the clutch line for the clutch master to slave connection. In order to get around that, I took this out. I had marked where I wanted to bend here, and I put a slight bend in the line using a bender. And now, as you can see, there's space between the clutch line and this, and I was able to get my clutch line in here, and it's in on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten it. Now that I have the master cylinder swapped out, I need to swap out the slave cylinder. That's that pink guy that you see back here. The way to do this is to first undo the hard line that's going into it. That hard line is right here, kind of pointing at it. That hard line right there. Then you undo the two bolts that are in the top. You can see one of them there. There's another one off to the right of it. Hard to get a shot of that, but you're going to undo both those bolts and that's going to come out. Then you bring over your brand new slave cylinder and put it in its place. Once you've installed your master and slave, you're going to need the help of an assistant in order to bleed the system out. When you're bleeding the system out, basically what you're doing is you're removing all of the air such that the lines are fully primed with hydraulic fluid. In this case, it's brake fluid. You're going to go ahead and do that using a line wrench like this one. Please do not use a standard open end wrench, as you will round out those fittings. They're very soft. What you're first going to do is either bench bleed this, or as I tend to do is you have your assistant pump. You'll put a rag underneath this fitting and you'll open here at this fitting while your assistant is holding the pedal down, and then you'll lock it. As soon as you do that and you get fluid out of there, then you can move down to the slave cylinder. Once you're at the slave cylinder, you'll have your assistant pump several times and then hold the clutch pedal to the floor, and you'll undo that fitting right there. While the person holds the pedal down, you open that up, you let it leak, and you close it. I always put a paper rag around it. That way I can catch any fluid that falls. As you know, brake fluid is corrosive. It will damage paint and metal that it stays on top of, so you want to make sure that you don't let it spill everywhere. So I just wrap that with a rag. I put the wrench on it. While my assistant is holding the pedal down, I open it. You're going to do that a couple times until fluid leaks out of there, and believe me, it will not leak out of there the first few times because you actually won't have fluid there. It'll take a while to get there. Now once you have fluid coming out of that rear fitting, you're going to move on to this bleeder fitting right here. You're going to slide a clear hose over that, going into like an old water bottle, and you'll go ahead and have your assistant pump the clutch pedal multiple times, hold it down just like before. While they're holding it, you're going to open that fitting and you're going to allow the fluid to flow out that clear tube. Now at first it's going to be a little bit of a burst of fluid. Eventually it'll be consistent fluid with a bunch of air bubbles in it, and eventually you'll have nothing but clear fluid and not a single air bubble. Once every time you do it, all you see is clear fluid with no air bubbles, the air is out of the system and you're officially done. One of the ways that you'll notice that it is starting to work is because you'll actually start to see this piston push out and push on the clutch fork, and that way you know you're getting close. However, just because it's pushing on the clutch fork doesn't mean that it's fully bled, so keep an eye on the fluid coming out of the tube. You want to make sure that it's absolutely clear for at least 2 or 3 cycles before you're done here. One last thing to keep in mind is that as you're bleeding at the slave cylinder, periodically you want to close it up and come up here to the top and check the level of the reservoir. You do not want to run it dry, at which point you'll have introduced air into the lines again and you'll have to start over from the beginning. So just every few times that you bleed at the slave, come back up and add some more fluid here to make sure that you don't run out. Pump it up. Hold. All right, pump it up.